The establishment's had a go at him, and he's very honourably put himself to the mercy of the Clacton people, and whatever they decide goes, and it's beyond and above and more important and superior to any parliamentary process. I mean, that's the line he's going down. But fundamentally, there can be no conclusion to be drawn other than he recognised he was going to have the book thrown at him correctly, as many people in reform concede. He was going to have the book thrown at him, and he's moved to short-circuit due process.
And here with me in the studio on Drive, Ollie Cole, Times Radio's newsroom reporter. Ollie, good to have you here. You are scanning every network, all social media, and looking for what people are saying and thinking about this developing story. Tell me more.
So there's two interesting things happening, I think, actually. One is, as you were discussing with Michael Howard there, calculation is happening in every party headquarters at the moment over what they do in terms of standing a candidate in this by-election. Ed Davey from the Lib Dems, he's made his stance pretty clear. He's already said that he thinks all the parties should stand aside and just let it crack on. There's a campaign by the synonymous with by-elections and election campaigns, Count Binface online, who is basically also calling on other parties to stand down and saying, actually, if you just run a straight race between Count Binface as the anti-Farage candidate and Nigel Farage, surely that's the best way forward. So there's some serious discussion happening on this in party headquarters across London, and also some sort of odd discussion happening online. I'll just bring you this, though, from Aubrey Allegretti, my colleague at the Times lobby team, that actually there's an interesting thing about the timing of this election now, which is tomorrow. Lee Anderson, the chief whip of Reform UK, who we spoke to a little bit earlier, he's pretty keen that he wants to move the writ pretty quickly, which basically means that by-election sort of system kicks off in earnest and you end up in that election period and they can set a date. Hopefully, he's hoping for sort of early next month. However, some Labour MPs, Aubrey says, are this afternoon having quite drastic conversations about whether they can put an amendment on the motion to move a writ, which is essentially to say that by-election can't happen unless the Standards Commissioner has come back with the report. So they are trying to basically say that we can move the writ, but the date of the by-election can't take place until after the Standards Commissioner has come back. Now, I imagine there will be a lot of head scratching going on in the House of Commons to work out whether that is possible. They will have to work out whether there is any precedent for it. As you know, we don't have a written constitution, so everything's sort of up in the air. But that is a serious discussion that some Labour MPs are having at the moment, which is they're trying to sort of call Nigel Farage's bluff over the timing of this election. And Nigel Farage is trying to pit this as the public against the establishment and sort of saying, well, look, whatever the Standards Commissioner says, it's the public who are going to vote for me. There is some Labour tacticians in the House of Commons at the moment in the corridors of Parliament trying to work out how they might subvert that a little bit and seeing whether an amendment might be the way to do it.
I don't know about you, Ollie. I'm going to stick my neck out and say there is no such precedent.
I don't want to disappoint those Labour MPs, but I don't think it'll be a winner. But it's interesting. All these conversations are happening, John, because let's be fair, when we both came into the office in the studios this morning and when the world woke up, Nigel Farage's future as Reform leader and a politician, it might have been up in the air from a sort of, is the public mood changing slightly, but it wasn't as up in the air as Nigel Farage has made it as of that statement at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
And I can testify to that too. Let's talk again later on, Ollie, thank you. Now then, let's say hello to Ben Habib, the former deputy leader of Reform, but now the leader of Advance UK. Hello to you, Ben.
Hello.
So tell me, when you saw and heard what Nigel Farage had to say earlier on, what did you think?
Well, I mean, I could see immediately what was going on. He obviously feared that the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner was going to throw the book at him, that he'd be suspended for more than 10 days. That would put him into the realms of a parliamentary, into a constituency recall. He'd have to fight a by-election, but he'd be doing it with a backdrop of having been found wanting in his conduct as a parliamentarian. Now he can fight the by-election without that overhanging him, because I believe the Standards Commissioner will suspend his inquiry, at least for the moment. So he can fight that by-election classing it as David versus Goliath. He's David. The establishment's had a go at him, and he's very honourably put himself to the mercy of the Clacton people, and whatever they decide goes, and it's beyond and above and more important and superior to any parliamentary process. I mean, that's the line he's going down. But fundamentally, there can be no conclusion to be drawn other than he recognised he was going to have the book thrown at him correctly, as many people in Reform concede. He was going to have the book thrown at him, and he's moved to short-circuit due process.
Well, or rather delay due process, which will be due a bit later on, just not immediately. And of course, I mean, if the other parties just choose not to play ball, I mean, to tortuously mix the metaphor, that'd just be shooting Nigel Farage's fox, wouldn't it?
It would. I think the correct thing to do, and it was impressive of Rupert Lowe to see this really very quickly, is not to stand. The Conservatives shouldn't stand, Labour shouldn't stand, the Liberal Democrats shouldn't stand. There is no need for this by-election. It's being called at the whim of one man who wants to sidestep due parliamentary process, and so it shouldn't be contested. And let him have an absolutely open field, and let him have a thumping majority, but with zero opposition.
Okay, well, that's a very clear line. We should point out, and it's probably fair to say this, Ben, isn't it? You were once close to Nigel Farage, and that's very far from the truth now.
I wouldn't say we were ever that close. I served as an MEP in the Brexit Party. He was quite an aloof leader at the time. We only met him from time to time in group meetings. But he exited the political arena, as it were, shortly after we left the institutions of the European Union on 31st January 2020, and I had very little interaction with him after that.
Okay, I was merely making the point that you are not on Nigel Farage's Christmas card list.
No, I should say I'm as far away from his Christmas card list as is possible, I suspect.
And on the question at the heart of this, the thing that Nigel Farage insists is part of an establishment stitch-up, that's the gift from Christopher Harborne of £5 million, before he became an MP, but he did, closely after that gift. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you take the view, do you share the view, admittedly as someone who's no fan of Nigel Farage, that raises legitimate areas of concern about transparency and about ethics, and at least about reassuring people about transparency and ethics?
100%. When Richard Tice first invited me to join Reform, I actually wrote him an email declining, and I had 4 or 5 points on that email, all to do with Nigel Farage. And one of them was Christopher Harborne's donation of £1 million to Boris Johnson. And I couldn't understand why Christopher Harborne, who put £14 million behind the Brexit Party in 2019 and 2020, would then put £1 million, which was the biggest donation in British political history at the time, behind Boris Johnson, who was a competitor to the Brexit Party, and someone, frankly, for many of whom are on my side of the fence, actually really screwed up Brexit. And that raised significant questions in my own mind. And I said to Richard Tice that when I eventually did agree to join the party, that if there was a whiff of Harborne around, I'd resign. And here we have Harborne now having donated £14 million to the Brexit Party in 2019-2020, £5 million to Nigel Farage personally in 2024, 15 million to Reform UK now. That's a total of 34 million quid. This man is a political donor. And the notion that any recipient of £5 million is not going to be at least remotely influenced by the individual who's enriched him, particularly knowing as we do that he was a political donor, is for the birds.
Okay, well, Reform UK, Nigel Farage insists that is the case. He asked for nothing, he was given nothing. We've heard it again today from leading figure Lee Harrison in the party. We will let our listeners make up their mind on that. For now, though, Ben Habib, thank you.
Thank you.